Episode 27 with Victor Pellegrino on the 9-Point Start with a Dream podcast.
Welcome to 9-Point Started with a Dream podcast. Our goal is to showcase the stories of athletes and the community that supports them by being authentic about their journey. Here's your host, Jacolby Gilliam.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast. This episode we have Victor Pellegrino of Victory Grips. Victor has a great story and great journey here, kind of what he's doing now, kind of taking something that's ordinary and making it extraordinary. He really advanced the game for CrossFit, making things more efficient and more usable in their hands and what they're doing. So great story here, great journey, and a lot of value, kind of how he's getting things going. So here we go. So the question I start with when I come to one is, when you were younger as an athlete, what was one of your bigger dreams or goals you wanted to achieve?
Well, I guess my true athletic career started with gymnastics. I get into the sport of gymnastics kind of late compared to most athletes. I was 12 years old. I was inspired by the 1984 Olympics, so my goal was to be on an Olympic stage as a gymnast. And of course, starting at 12, that was not the best time to start. The best time to start is like when you're about 5. But dove head in to gymnastics. I absolutely loved it. And by the time I was about 16 or 17, I realized I was not good enough to go to the Olympics. And that was a totally different level, but I wasn't bad, but just not at that Olympic level, and had a choice to go, to college, thinking about being a collegiate gymnast or just kind of change courses. And so I ended up changing courses, got into co-ed competitive cheerleading, and then actually performing as a gymnast or an acrobat, working for Disney and Universal Studios in Orlando as a performer. But so from an athletic standpoint, this whole journey started off with gymnastics, and that's where, of course, as gymnasts we use dowel grips, and that was essentially the really beginning, the catalyst of this whole thing that's kind of turned into a career.
Awesome. So what about gymnastics kind of drew you to it as that 12-year-old?
Well, it's just a superhuman feat. It was really cool to see what people could do, do with their bodies, in a very dynamic way, all the flipping, all the swinging, the balance and the flexibility. And then also from a physiology standpoint, I thought the athletic look of a gymnast was pretty cool. And I was like, man, I want some muscles like that. That was the draw. And that really started my fitness journey. I've been involved in fitness ever since. Once I started, in developing from a muscular standpoint in gymnastics, kind of got hooked on that, on building and building my body stronger, faster, more flexible, and then more muscular. Got into bodybuilding a little bit after gymnastics. Ended up studying my academic background. I graduated from Florida State in a fitness-related field. So just I've been a student of fitness pretty much all my life, or especially since I was about 12 when I started to appreciate what fitness does to the body, or what exercise and sports do to the body. I was that ended up turning into a career as a personal trainer, a coach, whether it be a gymnastics coach or whether it be, training people of all aspects of life, from kids all the way up to elderly people and everybody in between. And then, of course, as everybody does in the fitness industry, you can't be in the fitness industry and not know about CrossFit. And got into CrossFit in 2009 is when I first started CrossFit. And I couldn't believe I hadn't really heard about it then, before that, because it was starting to really flourish at that point in time. And so just like everybody else, ends up getting hooked, getting addicted to it. The training, the excitement to be able to compete again, especially for old athletes. It was like, wow, I can compete at this. This is great. This is fun. It's kind of giving me a little bit of a resurgence of just going to the gym and doing 3 sets of 10. I actually had a goal and had different aspects to perfect, like Olympic lifting, or being able to bring in my gymnastics background into it was gigantic for me. So I ended up started an affiliate with actually the guy that got me into CrossFit. He led the charge. I joined him in the journey, and then eventually he wanted to leave the business. I bought him out. And then during that time, around 2011, was when the grips, my idea of the grips was born. During that journey, I also have a master's degree in design management from the Savannah College of Art and Design. So kind of molding my gymnastics background, my fitness background, my experiences in CrossFit as they were at the time, and started conceptualizing the grips, just seeing how people's hands got trashed, seeing what was out there, and nobody had really taken a true inspiration from the sport that actually spawned grips for bar work or for ring work. And so I took all that knowledge, all that background, and started conceptualizing Victory grips. So that was the very, very beginning. And that conceptualization started with a buddy and I, who I went to SCAD with, and we were roommates after our master's degree, and we were drinking bourbon on our deck. And so over some drinks, that's where it all started.
Very cool. Over some bourbon. Very cool.
Yep.
So how did you kind of just start thinking like, I want to be the person that kind of innovates the sport. I want to be the one that makes the difference besides just owning a gym. What kind of gave you that feeling that I want to make that difference?
In terms of the grips? Is that what you're asking specifically, or?
Yeah. So like, what kind of inspired you kind of to want to take on the challenge to kind of be the innovator for the sport?
Well, seeing that there was an opportunity of what was out there at the time, which was really nothing really. And this was in 2011 when the conceptualization started. And so I've always been intrigued by companies or designers that take something that's kind of ordinary and make it extraordinary. A big inspiration for me was Nike. They took a running shoe, and at the time, back in the I believe it was late 60s or 70s, the running shoe was very basic, rudimentary. It wasn't helping athletes perform, and there was a track coach over in Oregon who, no pun intended, ran with his ideas and started developing a more sophisticated shoe. And the rest is history, where they ended up going, high performance, aesthetic, style. And that's kind of been my inspiration, is to take something that's ordinary, making it extraordinary. And so, of course, you can't use gymnastics grips as they are in the sport of gymnastics, like with the dowel or the type of leather, and put it into the sport of CrossFit or functional fitness and make it perform as you want it to. So they're, looking at what are the preferences of athletes, what are they doing, how is it different from gymnastics, and realizing that, where the protection needs to be, what are the different how they should function within a workout. So they need to be comfortable. They need to be easily removed, or they need to be able to accommodate various different movements without taking them off, or they just need to actually help an athlete increase, their potential just through the aspect of a piece of material on their hands. And so how does that work seamlessly for that functional fitness athlete? So it's just kind of, and then also the side thing is I've always been intrigued by sports, always liked coaching. I always want to help people get better at what they do in their sport. And so that's a big motivator for me. That's kind of like the higher purpose, is helping athletes get better. And that's my way of coaching is now and also contributing to the sport.
Very cool. So kind of go back a little bit. So say if someone listening right now, first I'm kind of hearing about Victory Grips, how would you describe them to say they're the football player or basketball player listening to this? Well, how would you describe what the grips are? Okay, so grips, if used correctly, if you know how to use grips correctly, can instantly increase your power in just that moment. You could literally be able to increase the number of reps in a given set of whether it be chest to bar pull-ups or any type of kipping pull-up, bar muscle up, or even ring muscle ups, and also increase your efficiency. Your grip is not going to wear out, and of course it's going to protect your hand. So there's both performance and a protection aspect in the grips. And they also help out with other movements such as deadlifts or kettlebell swings. And it's all about understanding how the hand works and utilizing the grips to your advantage. So it's a piece of equipment, kind of like cleats. If I was explaining it to a football player, given the type of ground you're on, it's going to give you traction. It's going to give you power and agility. And it's also going to protect. So that's essentially, you're in CrossFit or in functional fitness is your hands are just as important as your feet. Definitely, because when you get those blisters and calluses, you start feeling after a while. Oh yeah, yeah, and you need a certain amount of calluses. In this sport, you need to build up the dexterity, or not the dexterity, but the disposition of your hands, the skin of your hands, just like muscles. They adapt to impose demands. But nothing is going to, if let's say you're doing Murph, you're doing Murph barehanded, it can be done, but your hands are not going to feel good at the end of it. So when you were, year one, what was that journey like? So you had the idea, you started making products, you started making that journey. What was that first year like for you? Oh man, it was, I keep all the prototypes that I have. I literally keep everything that I made over the years. And so I just started this idea. So there's a couple of things where I knew I wanted to protect the wrist, for during false grip for people doing strict muscle ups, or some people even use a false grip, which you really shouldn't for kipping muscle ups, but a lot of people do. So I wanted to protect the wrist. And I wanted them to feel and function like gymnastics grips, but have the comfort, needed for the sport of functional fitness and CrossFit. So I literally was taking like gloves and chopping them up and just to kind of get a conceptual idea of just rough prototyping, just constantly rough prototyping with all sorts of materials, and then I realized I needed to buy a sewing machine and taught myself how to sew. And well, before that, I was using a lot of glue, and just started experimenting with different types of leather. Leather was tried and true. I was like, okay, it's got to be leather. That's what all grips are made of. I'm gonna, just gonna make them out of leather. And so, with a lot of rough prototyping and playing with them, and first, I always experiment with, I'm the product tester. Still do a lot of that today. So I started making my own grips, and then I got to the point where I'm like, wow, actually,
these are starting to function correctly and they feel pretty good. So I started selling them to the members of my gym to help me just kind of fund the idea. You know, I was selling them dirt cheap, and they knew what I was doing, and I was constantly measuring people's hands. You know, so before that, I was like, "Hey, let me see your hand. I need to measure it." And so I was just doing this big anthropometric study of, you know, the size and shape of a body part, which was the hands, and looking at the averages and looking at how hands are shaped and how all hands are different from one person to the next, from a male to a female, and realizing I needed to have a male line and a female line because women's hands are more slender, even though they might have the same length as a man. The hands are more slender. So it's kind of like, it makes sense. You have men's and women's clothing, they fit different, they're cut different. And so started making these more functional prototypes, and people started liking them. And I kept, and it was an on and off again, you know, kind of journey, because I had a business, coaching an affiliate, owning an affiliate, and, you know, sometimes this life gets in the way, but I kept kind of plugging away at it. And so that first year was, you know, it's been that first year is still feels the same as it is now, because I'm still designing. The grips are still evolving. My goal is to just make the most incredible feeling grip that's universal, that everybody would like, but that's more aspirational, because you're never going to find something that 100% of the people are going to like, you know, whether in material or in design. So that's what keeps me motivated. But yeah, it's been a constant iteration design process. And I got, so I had a member of my gym who was a patent attorney, intellectual property attorney with a very large law firm, intellectual property law firm. And I started just consulting with him and saying, is this patentable? And so he kind of led me, or counseled me through, mentored me through that intellectual property perspective. And so eventually we were able to I filed a provisional patent, tweak the design, and then we eventually filed the actual application. And that process took several years to get done, as any patent process does. And we finally got a utility patent through the United States Patent and Trademark Office in 2017. So March of last year is when we got the utility patent, because there's two types of patents. I don't know if you know about this. There's a design patent and a utility patent. A design patent just has to do with the aesthetics, just the actual how it looks. And it's kind of very narrow in scope, as opposed to a utility patent. It all has to do with function, and the utility patents are much harder to get because they're dealing with function. They're not just dealing with aesthetics. It's how the whole form influences the function. So the scope of our patent now has to do with the unique configuration of the grips that translates on how they function. So what I mean by that you can see in our grips is they just have a very unique shape, very curvilinear. All these curves in the grip function for a specific reason, and that reason is to make sure that the hand could function, could articulate naturally, without hindrance. There's no superfluous material anywhere. They don't feel clunky. They just should feel comfortable. They should feel intuitive. They shouldn't get in your head when you're trying to perform, like, this does not feel natural, or there's too much material hanging off here or there. So a lot of work was put into making sure that they worked seamlessly with your hand and your wrist. And we're still improving that. We're still doing, continuing, making amendments to that patent, keeping that patent alive as the grips evolve and become just a little bit more sophisticated.
I didn't know about the patent stuff, so that's definitely a lot of value they learned. In those early years, how did you go about building your brand reputation? Like how you kind of, like you said, you kind of started with your own gym, kind of giving them out to people and let them buy them like for a lower price. But as time grew, how did you kind of go from making it where it was a thing to being a big business?
Well, that all had to do with timing and the right scenario and just taking the leap. I got married, and my wife and I had a child. And so during that whole first year, I was involved with the Grid League that I told you about. And so I was training, about 3 or 4 hours a day, for Grid. Had a coach. My coach was Jason Leeden, who owns CrossFit Milford, and he's coached several games athletes. So I was training my ass off, owning an affiliate, still kind of playing with the grips, having a child, having a kid, doing Grid. But the opportunity with what Grid did was put me in the circle of a lot of games athletes. I was first on the New York Rhinos I rode the Pine, on that year, but I was on a team with Matt Fraser, Annie Thorisdottir, Easy Muhammad, Chelsea Hughes. We were some really names that are still known today, obviously. And then the second year I was on the Phoenix Rise, which I was on a team with Marcus Philly and Bjork Odensdottir. Both of them are some of my sponsored athletes. Easy Muhammad as well. It's one of our sponsored athletes. So I was able to pick their brain and show them the grips and just have a relationship with them. And that helped later on. But what I finally, once Grid was over, once that adventure was over, I decided to sell the affiliate, and I had the CrossFit Identity in Atlanta, and had 2 buddies that wanted to get into the business. I sold them the business. They're kicking ass today. But so that gave me the time to really focus on the grips. Luckily, my wife had a very good job. She was a consultant and project manager. So I was Mr. Mom, stay-at-home dad for a while, getting the business going, doing all the final touches, and then we finally made launched the company. And when we finally launched the company, it was the year that Dave Castro announced strict muscle ups in the regional. First time strict muscle ups were in a regional. Everybody's freaking out. Everybody's practicing strict muscle ups like it was their job, and tearing up their wrists. And I saw Emily Bridgers, and I knew Emily Bridgers before she was famous, just kind of through the Atlanta kind of circuit of CrossFit. And I actually did my L1 at the gym she belonged to at the time. And so she posted something like her wrist was just trashed on Instagram from doing strict muscle ups. And I knew she didn't wear grips, even though she was a gymnast. She was a gym dog, one of the female UGA gymnasts. And so I messaged her and I was like, Emily, are your wrists are trashed, huh? And she goes, yes. And I'm like, I got something for you. I'm coming to your gym now. And so I introduced her to the grips and actually converted her to actually using grips. She actually saw the benefits of them. So Emily's just an amazing person, just very humble. She's just willing to help, and she's a great coach in that aspect. So she posted right after I launched, and they made that announcement. Castro made that announcement about strict muscle ups. She made a post, and wasn't sponsored or anything, and she made a post about the grips, and she's like, these grips really helped me with the strict muscle ups, and then that it just all of a sudden things just took off. Like followers started coming. You could literally look at our dashboard on Instagram or on our e-commerce platform and just looking at all the activity, all the sales, all the followers. And that was crazy. That was like a crazy week. It was just like a whole week of that. So I owe a lot of gratitude for her kind of, creating some momentum. And so I reached out, I leveraged my network of friends that were, regional and games caliber athletes. And it just kind of took off. We were starting to sell globally the first week. And it's just the power of social media and how close knit the CrossFit community is. And that just helped just spread like wildfire. Kind of wasn't expecting all that, because I was literally sewing all the grips myself. I found a guy to do rabbit hole research who does, and he still does it. He's up in Iowa. My production team is in Iowa. We do everything in the United States. That's been really important to me. And so I was doing all the sewing myself in the garage, and it was crazy. But eventually we got a sewing team in Iowa as well. It's actually this guy's neighbors, a whole family of leather craftsmen. They do all the sewing for the grips. So it just kind of was, the right people, the right timing, the right scenarios, that kind of made it kind of blow up. And the momentum is still going strong today. We're still on a growth trajectory year after year.
That's a cool story right there. Like just how, just like one shout out almost kind of just really in the right position at the right time, just really just catapulted everything. So when that happened, what was your first reaction when you got all those orders come in? Were you like, how am I going to fill all these, or what was that initial reaction for you?
I was more like, holy shit. We were just like, oh my goodness, this is happening. So we were just like, literally, it was just became constant. Luckily we were able to get a nanny for my son. At the time I was in the garage and making grips, filling orders. My wife luckily she worked predominantly from home. So she would be on conference calls helping me out, with filling orders and putting all the grips together. And so it was a team effort. I was so lucky that I had her at home to help. And, she's, I'm more of a creative person, kind of all over the place, and she's very data oriented. She's a creative person herself, but she's just locked on. She has a lot more practical sense than I do, intelligence. And so she's helped, keep the business on point from a business perspective. I focus on product development. And so, we realized, it's just been a constant learning experience, because I realized that in this game of grip, the grip game, as I call it, the design and materials that they're made of is just as important. Design and materials, they're just pretty much equal. And I have been hell-bent on, I learned a lot about leather. Leather has its variances, its thickness, its different thicknesses, different textures, and there's so many variances and flaws with leather that we go through such a in-depth process of literally matching every single grip to make sure that, like, we measure it for thickness, we measure it, we feel it for texture, we inspect it for flaws, and then we match each grip accordingly. So leather is a very temperamental material. It's skin. It's a natural material. So it lacks consistency, but it's tried and true. And people love, there's some big leather diehard fans, but it's not the end all be all. And so I'm always a person that says there's got to be a better way. So we started coming out with what is our Stealth line, which is a high performance microfiber. And how I discovered that material is a guy by the name of Scott Carpenter. I was online looking at, I had a couple people reach out and say, hey, do you have any vegan friendly grips? And I'm like, I don't, they're leather. But it put the question in my head. And so I started researching vegan friendly, sporting goods. And so I came across this guy, Scott Carpenter. He owns Carpenter Trade, which is a baseball glove company. He was a longtime designer for a major baseball glove designer. And with the same questions, he said, there's got to be a better mousetrap. And so he created the first fully synthetic baseball glove, which was nearly a whole pound lighter, I think, to be specific. I think it was about 3/4 of a pound lighter than your typical leather baseball glove, which makes a gigantic difference for the ball players. And he started getting this really big following from Major League Baseball players, and because he makes everything custom. And so I reached out to him and said, I told him, what I'm doing, and he was gracious enough to send me some samples of the materials he uses and put me in touch with the company that produces these materials. And that's where the Stealth Grips came out of. So that material really started creating some really cool things. Like it's washable, it's light, it's very strong for how thin it is. And so I was thinking, gosh, this maybe, how can we just keep on finding something that my goal is leather's great, but I would love to find something that beats it, that all around is better. So, I am now coming out with a thicker version of that Stealth material. We're launching that, in October. So this is the first time I'm saying it publicly. And this material, it's still the Stealth material. It's still washable, but it's as thick as leather, but it's super soft like leather. It's like broken in leather. It's a very comfortable grip. And the reason why I'm bringing that out is some people need a thicker material for the protection of their hands. They need a little bit more cushion. A lot of the larger athletes, like Travis Mayer, for instance, he said it well. He's like, I need a material that I feel like I could really dig into with my hands. And so he's tested this out and he absolutely loves it. He goes, this really feels like leather. It's very comfortable, has great grip. And so we're launching that in October. And then I also have a collaboration with a company that engineers some rubber coated materials for the military, for the U.S. military. They're a North Carolina based company. And so we've been collaborating on trying to find the best composition of materials for grips. And it's just been amazing, working with this company. The engineer I'm working with, he's a CrossFitter. He understands it. He's a former, actually collegiate football player. So and he's a big guy. He was a lineman. So he understands the need for protection for protecting a big guy's hands and what all goes into it. So we're very close to coming out, which I think is a really good material that I'm designing specifically for powder coated bars, because powder coated bars, a lot of people say they're slick or they get slick but that's exactly what you compete on if you're competing in the CrossFit Games series, whether in the regionals or in the games or most gyms. If you're doing a local or regional throwdown or even Wadapalooza for that matter, you're going to be on powder coated bars. So we're very close to coming out with this a material that is super damn grippy, and it's totally legal. It doesn't have tack or anything, so it's not going to be flagged. But it's like a high performance tire on a road. So that launch date is to be determined, but it just, the constant iteration process of trying to find the best material, tweaking the design to accommodate that material, because you just can't have, you just can't have the same design just because of the nature of the material. You just kind of tweak things. So it's a constant process. It's a constant design process and an exploratory process. And also I involve athletes in every single aspect of the design process. I just don't design in a vacuum. I have our sponsored athletes. I have customers that, like, if I form relationships with customers, they email me, they have a particular issue with their grips, or whether grips rip, it's a 2 millimeter or less piece of material. And it's like, hey, my grips rip. I was doing this is my body weight. And I'm like, so I take those scenarios and bring them into the process. It's like, okay, let's work together. You obviously are hard on grips. I'm going to help. I need your input. And so I have over a pool of 100 different athletes, from games athletes to your regular gym goer, of all different body types that I collaborate with. And that group is like constantly changes, and where I constantly bring people into that group. So I'm really truly designing with the community, with the athletes involved, because, essentially that's who it's for. I need their help.
Wow. Okay. You're really innovating. I really respect that. Like, you're really trying to make the most efficient, best product out there. So in your journey so far, what year are you in with Victory Grips?
We actually launched the company in I formed the LLC in 2015. And we launched we launched the company May 5th, Cinco de Mayo of 2016. So we're now, at 2 years and a few months into the company.
That's awesome, man. A lot of growth along the way. So in those years, what has been like the hardest day? Like the hardest moment you've had so far in those 2 years? You don't mind sharing?
The most difficult moment was, it was a time where, it was finding the right material. I was using a form of leather that everybody really liked. It was really super soft. It was kind of thin, but it was not durable. And no matter what grip you have, no matter what grips, all the proper grips, Pixel grips, Bear Complex grips, there's right by the hand, at your thumb muscle, so to speak, where the grip kind of forms into the strap, is a stress point. If you make a fist and kind of extend your wrist back so your knuckles are cocked back, that pressure going forward creates a lot of pressure on the material. So there was a time where I was like, the grips were ripping at that aspect. I'm like, what the heck is going on? It was stressing me out really bad. And that's when that's where I really had to really dig deep and find the best leather out there, and learned a ton about leather. Just from the chemistry of how different chemicals, but during the tanning process of leather, could affect its tensile strength. And so luckily I found a tannery in the United States that helped teach me a lot about that. And they've been great collaborators with helping us determine or create, the best leather possible out there. And that was another reason why I wanted to besides trying to find something that accommodated vegan friendly or vegan athletes, was to find something, what's stronger? How do I avoid this? So I would say that was the most difficult time, because it was like, the design is right and the material is failing me. And it's like, I've done everything. And so, I would say that was the most stressful time. We still get grips that malfunction, but it's part of the game. It's part of the improvement. It's like, you just keep on hammering your weaknesses and making them into strengths.
So as you kind of continue to grow this journey, where do you hope to see Victory Grip grow into in the next couple of years, the next couple of months? Like, not necessarily you're launching out in October. What do you hope to kind of see your company do for the industry?
So my vision is to be a true gymnastics brand within the functional fitness space. So bringing that expertise, bringing that traditional gymnastics roots, and trying to create, whether it be through the products or whether it be through sharing knowledge about gymnastic skills, where I'm really trying to be a true gymnastics brand, because that is my roots. It's gymnastics. And I'm really, I think I'm the only grip company that is actually, a gymnast produced these grips, and they're inspired by gymnastics. So the goal is a true gymnastics brand within that space where, but then also, I'm teaming up with, I'm starting to, I sponsored Power Monkey Camp, sponsoring their camp again this year, where I just have, I have a deep respect for Dave Durante and Shane Jarity over at Power Monkey. We share a similar vision of really wanting to promote men's gymnastics, to bring more popularity to the men's gymnastics, because it's, it needs a little bit of help, and it's such a great sport. So, I'm in talks with them to see how can we collaborate to accomplish that goal of promoting men's gymnastics. And then also with looking into designing actual grips for the artistic gymnastics market. They're made of leather right now. There's ways that they can be improved, and so collaborating with some very special people that I know. I can't say we're going to make an announcement once we get more traction, but the goal is to come out with actual artistic gymnastics grips. So I want to conquer the grip game. I want to be, have the best grips out on the market to see them in the Olympics. We already see them, our Victory grips in the games. I want to see them in the Olympics. So, just be the quintessential, making that, ordinary gymnastics grip into something extraordinary that crosses genres, that crosses into, artistic gymnastics and then also into the functional fitness aspect. We'll always just be gymnastics. We'll just deal with the, with the hands and the wrists, dealing with how the hand can function better. So, anything that deals with just that segment of the part of the body, that's what we're going to take on. And especially if it has to do with gymnastics, we're going to, try to penetrate it.
Love it. Love it. I can see it. I see it now. The Olympics. I'm looking forward to seeing Victory Grips there. So the last question for you, if you could, how do you describe Victory Grips, your brand, your company in 5 words, like just 5 adjectives or whatever? How would you describe your brand?
In 5 words, I would say performance, protection, design, and extraordinary. Because we're trying to help athletes perform better. We're trying to protect their hands. We're constantly designing and trying to make something that's ordinary extraordinary. That's what it comes down to. It. And then, of course, we want to help athletes perform better. So, we're here to help, so to speak.
I love it. Yeah, something extraordinary, something ordinary to extraordinary. Awesome. Well, Victor, thanks for coming on. And then last thing, social media wise, what are all your handles or your handles? You want to put it out real quick?
Yeah, it's Victory Grips on Instagram. Everything is Victory Grips, and my personal email, and it's literally my wife and I that answer the emails. We're a very small company. So it's victorygrips@gmail.com. So either my wife or I myself will be, we'll answer your questions.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on again, Victor. Like, it's been great talking, kind of learning more about your journey. 'Cause I think it's so cool to kind of see how a company is kind of building real time. I think that's really innovative for athletes. So appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much.
Yo, thanks for listening to this episode of the 9 Point Started With a Dream podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, leave a review. We would love to hear your thoughts. You can find more athlete-driven content at 9point.com. Till the next episode, you're only one opportunity away. Peace.